My name is Dorothy Fletcher, and I'm 53 years old. Last Christmas Eve, I watched my perfect family celebration turn into a nightmare when my son Michael violently pushed me away and screamed, "Don't touch me," in front of 30 guests. The room fell silent as I stood there, stunned, my arms still reaching for the hug I'd given him every Christmas for 30 years. My 9-year-old granddaughter Lily stared at us with confusion and fear while my daughter-in-law Brenda smirked behind her fake concerned expression. That moment shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. Before we dive into this heartbreaking story of family betrayal and manipulation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button if you believe family bonds should be built on truth, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama. You won't believe what my granddaughter revealed that changed everything. For 15 years, I had hosted the most elaborate Christmas Eve parties in our suburban Boston neighborhood. Every December, I transformed my colonial home into a winter wonderland with garlands cascading down the mahogany banister, twinkling lights in every window, and a 12-foot Fraser fir decorated with ornaments collected from family trips around the world. I spent weeks preparing homemade appetizers, hiring caterers for the main course, and selecting thoughtful gifts for each of my 30 regular guests. This tradition represented everything precious to me about family and togetherness. Michael had been the center of these celebrations since childhood. Even after marrying Brenda 8 years ago and moving to the neighboring town, he never missed our Christmas Eve gathering. I cherished watching him help Lily hang ornaments on the lower branches, just as he had done as a boy. Their laughter filled my heart with the kind of joy only grandmothers understand. Lily would race to me the moment they arrived, throwing her small arms around my waist and chattering about school, friends, and whatever book she was reading that week. This year felt different from the moment they walked through my front door. Michael avoided eye contact, keeping his distance while Brenda hovered nearby with an expression I couldn't quite read. When I approached him with my traditional welcome hug, something I'd done thousands of times throughout his life, his reaction was explosive and terrifying. He shoved me backward with such force that I stumbled into the Christmas tree, ornaments crashing to the hardwood floor as 30 shocked faces turned toward us. "Don't touch me," he shouted, his voice filled with disgust and rage I'd never heard before. "Keep your hands off me." The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable echoing through the suddenly silent room. My sister Grace gasped audibly while my neighbor Ruth dropped her wine glass, the red liquid spreading across my cream-colored Persian rug like blood at a crime scene. But it was Brenda's reaction that chilled me to the bone. While everyone else looked horrified and confused, she wore the faintest smile of satisfaction, as if watching a performance unfold exactly as she'd scripted it. When Lily reached toward me with tears in her eyes, calling, "Grandma," in a small, frightened voice, Brenda yanked the child backward with unnecessary force. "We're leaving," Michael announced coldly, grabbing Lily's coat while avoiding my desperate attempts to catch his eye. "This family gathering is over for us." They stormed out without another word, leaving me standing among broken ornaments while my remaining guests whispered nervously among themselves. The party continued, but the magical atmosphere had been poisoned by confusion and unspoken questions. Grace tried to console me, suggesting that Michael might be going through work stress or marital problems, but deep in my heart, I knew this wasn't random. The calculated timing, Brenda's subtle satisfaction, and Michael's rehearsed-sounding words all pointed to something far more sinister than a moment of holiday stress. Someone had been working behind the scenes to turn my son against me, and I had a terrible feeling that this was only the beginning of a nightmare I never could have imagined. The week following Christmas Eve became a masterclass in social destruction that left me reeling from its precision and cruelty. My neighbor Ruth appeared at my door 3 days after the party, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by obvious discomfort as she wrung her hands and avoided direct eye contact. What she revealed made my blood run cold with its calculated malice. "Dorothy, I need to tell you something that Brenda said to me last month," Ruth began hesitantly. She came over for coffee and started talking about how worried she was about Michael. "She said you'd been acting inappropriately with him since childhood, that your affection wasn't normal motherly love but something much darker." She claimed Michael was finally finding the courage to set boundaries with his abuser. The words felt like poison arrows piercing my chest. Ruth continued reluctantly, explaining how Brenda had painted a picture of generational abuse, suggesting that my love for my son had always crossed inappropriate lines. She'd used psychological terms like emotional incest and covert abuse, weaving a narrative so twisted yet convincing that Ruth had actually started to believe it until she witnessed my genuine shock at the Christmas party. She told me you've been losing your mental faculties too, Ruth added quietly. Said you sometimes forget appropriate boundaries and that Michael was protecting Lily from experiencing what he endured growing up. Brenda made it sound like she was the hero saving her family from a predator. My book club meeting that Thursday confirmed the extent of the damage. Women I'd known for over a decade suddenly seemed uncomfortable around me, their conversations stopping abruptly when I entered the room. Margaret Hoffman, who'd been my closest friend in the group, finally pulled me aside after an hour of awkward tension. Dorothy, the board received some concerning information about your behavior with family members, she said, her voice clinically distant. We think it would be best if you took a break from the club until these matters are resolved. We have to think about the safety and comfort of all our members. The rejection felt like a physical punch to my stomach. These women had been my support system through my divorce, my father's death, and countless smaller life challenges. Now they looked at me as if I carried some contagious moral disease, their trust shattered by carefully planted seeds of doubt. Sunday morning at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church provided the most devastating confirmation of how thoroughly my reputation had been assassinated. Families I'd known for years suddenly found urgent reasons to avoid sitting near me. During the peace exchange, when congregation members traditionally hug and greet each other, people awkwardly nodded from a distance rather than approach me. After service, I overheard Janet Morrison whispering to Linda Walsh near the parish hall entrance. She always seemed so devoted to that son of hers. Makes you wonder if there was something unnatural about it. Poor Michael, finally having the courage to speak his truth. My attempts to contact Michael proved equally devastating. His phone went straight to voicemail for 2 days before he finally answered, his voice tight with fury I'd never experienced from him before. Stop calling me, he hissed through the phone. I'm done pretending that what you did to me was normal. Your touching, your constant need for physical affection, the way you made me feel like I belonged to you instead of being your son. Brenda helped me understand that real mothers don't act like that with their children. These words, so clearly coached and rehearsed, shattered my heart into pieces. Michael had always been affectionate, the child who crawled into bed with me during thunderstorms until he was 12, who hugged me goodbye every morning before school, who called me his best friend throughout high school. Now that same loving history was being rewritten as something sick and twisted. If you contact me or my family again, I'll file a restraining order, he continued coldly. Brenda's lawyer says we have grounds for harassment charges, especially with your concerning behavior around Lily. Stay away from us, Dorothy. You've done enough damage for one lifetime. The phone went dead, leaving me sobbing alone in my kitchen while the walls of my carefully built life crumbled around me. Someone had systematically poisoned my son's mind against me, turning our most precious memories into weapons of destruction, and I was powerless to stop the spreading infection of lies. The destruction of my personal relationships was devastating enough, but Brenda's campaign extended far beyond social circles into my professional life with surgical precision. As a real estate agent for Pemberton and Associates, I'd built a sterling reputation over 15 years, earning awards for client satisfaction and closing deals that other agents couldn't manage. My expertise in the Boston suburbs market had made me one of the firm's top performers, providing the financial stability I'd needed as a single mother and now as an independent woman. Tuesday morning brought a phone call that sent ice through my veins. Mrs. Catherine Whitmore, scheduled to close on a $400,000 colonial that Friday, spoke with barely controlled anger when I answered my office line. Miss Fletcher, I received a very disturbing anonymous phone call yesterday evening, she said coldly. The caller claimed you've been investigated for inappropriate behavior with family members and suggested I research your background before proceeding with this transaction. They said you're mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. My hands trembled as I tried to explain that someone was spreading malicious lies about me, but Mrs. Whitmore had already made her decision. I cannot in good conscience work with someone under these kinds of accusations. Please have your broker transfer my file to another agent immediately. I want no further contact with you. 3 more clients cancelled within 48 hours, each reporting similar anonymous calls describing me as psychologically disturbed and under investigation for family abuse. The callers provided enough specific details about my personal situation to sound credible while remaining safely anonymous. Someone who knew the intimate details of my life was systematically destroying my livelihood. Thursday brought a summons to my broker's office that felt like walking toward my own execution. Harrison Pemberton, a man who'd mentored me for over a decade, sat behind his mahogany desk with a stack of printed emails and a deeply troubled expression. Dorothy, I've received multiple complaints about your conduct, both personal and professional, he began gravely. Anonymous reports suggest you're experiencing mental health issues that could impact your judgment and potentially endanger clients. There are also allegations about inappropriate behavior with family members. The betrayal in his eyes cut deeper than the words themselves. This man had celebrated my successes, supported me through my divorce, and trusted me with his most important clients. Now he looked at me as if I were a stranger capable of unthinkable acts. I have to suspend your real estate license pending a full investigation, he continued reluctantly. I'm sorry, Dorothy, but I can't risk the firm's reputation or our client's safety. These allegations are too serious to ignore. My financial advisor, Robert Chen, called that same afternoon with equally troubling news. Dorothy, I received a visit from a woman claiming to be your daughter-in-law. She expressed concerns about your mental competency and asked about procedures for family members to gain control of assets when someone becomes incapacitated. The calculated nature of Brenda's approach became crystal clear. She'd presented herself as a caring family member worried about my deteriorating mental state, gathering information about my investment portfolios, retirement accounts, and property holdings. When Robert explained privacy laws prevented him from sharing details, Brenda had left pamphlets about dementia warning signs and elder abuse prevention. She seemed genuinely concerned, Robert admitted. Said there were incidents of inappropriate behavior and suggested your judgment was becoming impaired. She asked if I'd noticed any signs of cognitive decline during our meetings. Friday's mail brought a certified letter from Blackstone, Morris & Associates, a law firm I'd never heard of. The correspondence, signed by attorney David Morris on Michael's behalf, formally notified me to cease all contact with his family due to continued harassment and threatening behavior. The letter detailed fabricated incidents, alleged late-night phone calls where I supposedly made inappropriate comments about my granddaughter, claims that I'd been following the family, and appearing uninvited at their home and Lily's school. Most chilling were references to concerning physical behavior toward minor family members that has created a hostile environment for the child. Each false accusation was crafted to build a legal foundation for restraining orders while painting me as an unstable predator pursuing innocent victims. The letter concluded with threats of criminal charges for harassment and suggested that continued contact would result in protective measures including law enforcement intervention. Sitting alone in my kitchen that evening, surrounded by legal threats and financial ruin, I realized the full scope of what Brenda had orchestrated. She'd identified every pillar supporting my life, family relationships, social connections, professional reputation, and financial security, then systematically destroyed each one with lies so carefully crafted that even people who'd known me for years were questioning my character. The most terrifying part was how isolated she'd made me. Every potential ally had been poisoned against me, every support system contaminated with doubt. I was fighting an invisible enemy who'd turned my own community into weapons against me while hiding behind the mask of a concerned family member protecting her loved ones from a dangerous woman. Just when isolation threatened to crush me completely, unexpected voices of sanity emerged from the wreckage of my former life. The first came on a gray January morning when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in months. "Dorothy, it's Frank." My ex-husband's voice carried none of the casual distance that had characterized our interactions since our amicable divorce 10 years earlier. Instead, I heard anger and concern that immediately put me on alert. "I need to see you today. There's something you need to know about what's happening to you." We met at a quiet cafe downtown where Frank's expression grew increasingly grim as he described a visit he'd received from Brenda 3 months earlier. She'd arrived at his apartment unannounced, carrying a folder of documents and wearing what he described as a performance of concerned desperation. She wanted me to sign statements about your mental health during our marriage, Frank explained, his weathered hands gripping his coffee cup tightly. Said Michael was building a case to protect Lily from your inappropriate behavior and needed evidence of your long-term instability. She had official-looking papers claiming you'd been abusive to Michael as a child. Frank's next words sent chills through my body. Dorothy, she knew things about our private life that she couldn't have learned from casual conversation. Details about your therapy after your mother's death, about the medication you took for anxiety during Michael's teenage years, even about arguments we had that I'm certain Michael never witnessed. The implication was staggering. Brenda had been gathering information about me for years, probably since shortly after she married Michael, building a psychological profile she could weaponize when the time was right. Frank's refusal to cooperate had apparently frustrated her plans, but she'd pressed forward anyway. I told her to get the hell out of my apartment, Frank continued. What she was describing wasn't the woman I was married to for 18 years or the mother I watched raise Michael. But Dorothy, she was convincing. If I hadn't lived with you, if I hadn't seen your relationship with Michael firsthand, I might have believed her. 2 days later, another unexpected ally emerged from an equally surprising source. Janet Morrison, Lily's third-grade teacher at Hillside Elementary, called me at home with barely contained professional concern. Mrs. Fletcher, I need to speak with you about Lily, she began carefully. I'm violating some protocols by calling you directly, but I'm seeing behaviors in your granddaughter that are deeply troubling. Janet explained that Lily, previously one of her most engaged and cheerful students, had become withdrawn and anxious over the past 2 months. The child struggled to concentrate, startled easily, and had begun exhibiting signs of what Janet recognized as coached responses during casual conversations. Yesterday I mentioned how nice it must be to have grandparents nearby, and Lily became visibly agitated, Janet continued. She started reciting what sounded like rehearsed lines about her grandmother being dangerous, and how she doesn't feel safe around family members. But Mrs. Fletcher, these didn't sound like a child's natural words. The teacher's training in recognizing signs of child abuse had triggered her professional instincts, but not in the way Brenda had intended. When I asked Lily to tell me about feeling unsafe, she couldn't provide any specific examples. Instead, she repeated the same phrases over and over, like she'd been practicing them. That's a classic sign of coaching rather than genuine trauma. Janet's observations confirmed my worst fears about Lily being manipulated, but they also provided the first crack in Brenda's carefully constructed facade. A trained professional was seeing through the deception and recognizing the real abuse taking place, the psychological manipulation of an innocent child. The most significant breakthrough came from my sister Grace, who'd been conducting her own quiet investigation since the Christmas party disaster. Grace appeared at my door one evening with a manila folder and an expression of barely controlled fury. I've been doing some digging into your daughter-in-law's background, she announced without preamble. Dorothy, this woman is not what she appears to be. Grace spread financial documents across my dining room table like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Bank statements, credit reports, and mortgage information painted a picture of severe financial desperation hidden behind Brenda's facade of suburban prosperity. She has gambling debts totaling over $60,000, Grace explained. Secret credit cards, a second mortgage Michael probably doesn't know about, and she's been borrowing money from loan sharks. The interest alone is crushing them. But the most chilling discovery came from public records in Texas, where Brenda had lived before moving to Massachusetts. Her previous mother-in-law died under suspicious circumstances after being estranged from the family, Grace continued. Police investigated reports of elder abuse, but the case was dropped when the old woman died of a stroke before charges could be filed. Court documents revealed a pattern of behavior identical to what I was experiencing. Brenda had systematically isolated her first husband's mother, spread rumors about the woman's mental competency, and gained control of her assets shortly before her death. The parallels were too specific to be coincidental. Dorothy, I think she's done this before, Grace said quietly. And I think she's planning to do to you exactly what she did to that poor woman in Texas. The only difference is that you're younger and stronger, so she has to work harder to destroy your credibility first." Sitting in my dining room surrounded by evidence of Brenda's true nature, I felt the first glimmer of hope I'd experienced in weeks. I wasn't losing my mind, and I wasn't alone in recognizing the manipulation taking place. Real allies were emerging, people who could see through the lies and help me fight back against the systematic destruction of my life. But I also realized the stakes were far higher than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about family relationships or even my reputation. Brenda was orchestrating a long-term plan to gain control of my assets, just as she'd apparently done before. The ultimate goal wasn't just to isolate me from Michael and Lily. It was to destroy me completely while positioning herself as the rightful heir to everything I'd worked to build. The breakthrough I'd been praying for came from the most heartbreaking source imaginable: my 9-year-old granddaughter calling me from her school's office during lunch period. Her small, trembling voice on the phone shattered what remained of my composure while simultaneously providing the first direct evidence of the psychological abuse being inflicted upon her. "Grandma Dorothy?" Lily whispered into the phone, clearly terrified of being overheard. "I told Mrs. Morrison I felt sick so I could use the nurse's phone. I miss you so much it makes my tummy hurt all the time." Fighting back tears, I assured her that I missed her too and asked how she was doing at home. What she revealed made me want to drive straight to her school and rescue her from the nightmare her own mother was creating. "Mommy makes me practice saying bad things about you," Lily confessed, her voice breaking. "She says if anyone asks about you, I have to say that you touched me in ways that made me feel uncomfortable and that I don't feel safe around you. But Grandma, that's not true. You never hurt me. You give the best hugs and you always smell like vanilla cookies." My hands shook as I held the phone, listening to my granddaughter describe hours of coaching sessions where Brenda had her rehearse false accusations against me. "She says if I don't say the right words, bad people will take me away from Mommy and Daddy forever," Lily continued. She showed me pictures of scary places where children go when they don't protect their families. The calculated cruelty of using a child's deepest fears to force cooperation in destroying an innocent person left me speechless. Brenda had weaponized Lily's love for her parents and her natural childhood anxieties, creating a scenario where the little girl believed she had to lie to protect her family. "I don't understand why Mommy says you're dangerous," Lily sobbed. "She tells Daddy that you hurt him when he was little, but he always told me stories about how much he loved spending time with you. Now he won't talk about you at all, and he gets mad if I ask questions." Recognizing that this phone call might be my only opportunity to document the truth, I asked Lily if she would mind if I recorded our conversation, explaining that sometimes grown-ups need proof when children tell them important things. Her innocent agreement provided legal evidence that could potentially save both our lives. With my phone's recording function activated, I gently encouraged Lily to tell me about her real memories of our time together. Her natural, uncoached responses painted a picture completely opposite to the narrative Brenda had been constructing. "Remember when you taught me to make chocolate chip cookies from scratch and let me crack all the eggs myself?" She giggled through her tears. "And when we went to the Boston Children's Museum and you bought me that stuffed whale in the gift shop? And you always let me stay up late to watch movies when I sleep over, and we make popcorn and hot chocolate." For 20 minutes, Lily described years of genuinely loving interactions, camping trips where I'd taught her to identify constellations, afternoons spent reading together in my garden, and holidays where she'd helped me decorate cookies for the church bake sale. Her memories were specific, joyful, and completely inconsistent with any form of inappropriate behavior. But when I asked about recent conversations with her mother, Lily's voice became robotic and rehearsed. "Mommy says you touched me wrong when I was little and that I blocked out the memories because they were too scary. She says that's why I think I had good times with you, but really you were hurting me and I just don't remember." The sophistication of the psychological manipulation was breathtaking. Brenda had used concepts like repressed memories and childhood trauma to explain away Lily's positive recollections while implanting false narratives that contradicted the child's lived experience. Our conversation was interrupted when Lily heard footsteps in the hallway. "I have to go," she whispered urgently. "Promise me you won't stop loving me, Grandma. Promise you'll find a way to make this stop." That evening, my recording proved prophetic when Frank called to report a disturbing incident he'd witnessed from his apartment balcony, which overlooked the playground where Michael's family lived. Around 6 o'clock, he'd seen Brenda violently shaking Lily in their backyard while screaming words he couldn't quite hear. The child was crying hysterically, Frank reported. When Michael came outside, Brenda was pointing toward your house and gesturing dramatically. I could see her mouth moving like she was telling him a story, and Michael got angrier and angrier as she talked. Within hours, Frank's neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez had called Child Protective Services to report what she'd also witnessed, an adult woman physically and emotionally abusing a young child in what appeared to be a coaching session designed to force specific responses from the terrified little girl. But Brenda's skill at manipulation extended to her interactions with authorities. When CPS investigator Angela Martinez arrived to interview the family, Brenda had transformed into the picture of maternal concern and protection. According to Janet Morrison, who was contacted as part of the investigation, Brenda claimed that Lily's emotional distress was the result of continued stalking and harassment by her dangerous grandmother. She produced fake evidence of my supposed attempts to contact Lily, including manufactured voicemails and text messages that I'd never sent. She told CPS that you've been traumatizing Lily by trying to maintain contact despite restraining orders, Janet reported to me confidentially. Said the child has nightmares about you and begged them to make sure you can't get near her at school. The twisted brilliance of Brenda's strategy became clear. She was using Lily's genuine distress, caused by her own psychological abuse, as evidence that I was the source of the child's trauma. Every tear Lily shed from being forced to lie about me became proof in Brenda's narrative that I was a dangerous predator causing psychological damage to an innocent child. But Brenda had made one critical error in her performance. Angela Martinez, experienced in recognizing signs of coached testimony and parental manipulation, noticed inconsistencies in Lily's responses that suggested external pressure rather than genuine fear. The CPS report would later note concerns about potential parental alienation and coached responses that didn't align with typical patterns of legitimate abuse disclosures. Still, the immediate result was that I found myself under official investigation while Brenda successfully positioned herself as the protective mother shielding her daughter from a predatory grandmother. The irony was devastating. The real child abuser was using her own victim's trauma as evidence against the very person trying to save that child from psychological destruction. The weeks following the CPS investigation marked my complete transformation from respected community member to neighborhood pariah, a social assassination so thorough that I began to understand how innocent people could be driven to suicide by false accusations. Brenda's campaign entered a new phase of public destruction that left me feeling like I was living in a nightmare version of my former life. The first sign came when I attempted to grocery shop at the Whole Foods where I'd been a regular customer for 8 years. As I pushed my cart through the produce section, conversations stopped and mothers pulled their children closer, creating invisible barriers around me as if I carried some contagious moral disease. Jenny Walsh, whose daughter had played soccer with Lily for 2 seasons, literally turned her cart around and fled down a different aisle when she spotted me examining tomatoes. At the checkout line, teenage cashier Emma Rodriguez, who'd always been friendly and chatty, refused to make eye contact as she mechanically scanned my items. Her manager, Steve Patterson, appeared beside the register and quietly suggested that I might be more comfortable shopping during off-peak hours when fewer families are present. The humiliation of being treated like a registered sex offender while buying groceries was nothing compared to what awaited me that Sunday at St. Matthew's. I'd attended this Episcopal church for over 15 years, serving on committees, organizing charity drives, and building genuine friendships with fellow parishioners. Now I walked into a sanctuary that felt more like a courtroom where I'd already been convicted. Someone had spray-painted "child abuser" in red letters across the windshield of my Honda Civic while I attended morning service. The vandalism was clearly visible to everyone leaving church, creating a public spectacle that drew dozens of curious onlookers and concerned whispers. Reverend Thomas Mitchell, a man who'd counseled me through my divorce and celebrated Michael's wedding, approached me in the parking lot with obvious discomfort. "Dorothy, several parishioners have expressed concerns about your presence here given the ongoing family situation," he said carefully. Perhaps it would be best if you took some time away from regular worship while these matters are resolved. I'm sure you understand our need to maintain a safe environment for all our families. The rejection from my spiritual community felt like being cast out of Eden by someone I'd trusted to provide sanctuary during life's darkest moments. Even the janitor, Carlos Martinez, who'd always greeted me warmly in Spanish, avoided my eyes as he cleaned up the glass fragments from my vandalized car. The final blow to my social standing came through a neighborhood meeting that Brenda organized under the guise of child safety awareness. She'd distributed professional-looking flyers throughout our subdivision announcing a presentation about recognizing and protecting children from family predators. Grace attended this meeting as my spy and reported back with details that left me physically nauseated. Brenda had transformed our elementary school cafeteria into a seminar room complete with handouts, PowerPoint presentations, and carefully crafted talking points that referenced my situation without naming me directly. She discussed warning signs of grandparent abuse, Grace reported with barely controlled anger. Described scenarios where trusted family members use their positions to exploit children while hiding behind reputations of respectability. Dorothy, she was obviously talking about you, but doing it so cleverly that she couldn't be accused of defamation. Over 50 neighbors attended, including parents I'd known for years who'd previously trusted me to babysit their children during emergencies. Brenda's presentation included manufactured statistics about intergenerational abuse, psychological profiles of predatory grandparents, and strategies for protecting children from manipulative elderly relatives who refused to accept appropriate boundaries. The most devastating element was Brenda's masterful use of my own reputation against me. She acknowledged that these predators often appear to be pillars of the community, Grace continued. Said they're skilled at maintaining public personas while privately traumatizing family members who are too afraid or ashamed to speak out. By the time Brenda finished her presentation, my neighbors were convinced they'd been living next to a dangerous predator who'd successfully fooled them for years. The woman who'd once organized block parties and helped jumpstart dead car batteries was now viewed as a threat requiring community vigilance and protective measures. The social isolation became complete when my former bridge club officially disinvited me from our monthly games. Linda Patterson, who'd been my partner for 6 years, delivered the news with clinical detachment that was somehow worse than outright hostility. The group feels uncomfortable given recent developments, she explained over the phone. We can't risk having someone under investigation for child abuse in our homes. You understand that we have to protect ourselves and our families. But the cruelest twist came when I discovered that Brenda had been secretly recording our Christmas Eve party, capturing my innocent interactions with Lily and then editing them to appear inappropriate when viewed without context. Neighbors reported receiving anonymous USB drives containing this evidence, along with written commentary explaining why normal grandmother behavior should be interpreted as grooming techniques. My attempt to hug Michael, the gesture that had triggered this entire nightmare, was presented as evidence of my inability to respect boundaries. Video of me helping Lily hang ornaments was described as inappropriate positioning and unnecessary physical contact. Even my gift of children's books to Lily was characterized as a grooming technique designed to maintain access to a vulnerable child. Sitting alone in my house as February snow covered my vandalized car, I realized that Brenda had achieved something truly diabolical. She'd turned my own loving behavior into evidence of predatory intent while positioning herself as the heroic protector who'd finally exposed the truth. Every kindness I'd shown, every expression of love I'd given, every grandmotherly gesture I'd made was now being reinterpreted through the lens of suspicion and moral corruption. The complete reversal of my reputation from respected community member to suspected predator demonstrated the terrifying power of well-crafted lies to destroy lives. Brenda had proven that with enough patience, strategic thinking, and willingness to manipulate innocent people including children, anyone could be transformed into a monster in the eyes of their own community. My descent into complete social isolation might have continued indefinitely if not for a chance encounter at the downtown Boston Public Library, where I'd begun spending my days to escape the suffocating atmosphere of my own neighborhood. While researching legal options at a computer terminal, I overheard 2 women discussing a case eerily similar to my own situation. The grandmother hired Catherine Webb from Morrison and Associates, one woman explained to her friend. She specializes in parental alienation cases and has a reputation for destroying manipulative parents who weaponize children against family members. Catherine Webb's office occupied the 32nd floor of a sleek downtown building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. At 58, she possessed the sharp intelligence and controlled intensity of someone who'd spent decades fighting battles that most people couldn't imagine. Her steel-gray hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her blue eyes seemed to catalog every detail as I recounted my nightmare. "Mrs. Fletcher, what you're describing follows a very specific pattern that I've seen dozens of times," she said after listening to my story without interruption. "This isn't random family dysfunction or even typical divorce-related manipulation. This appears to be calculated psychological warfare designed to isolate you from support systems while positioning your daughter-in-law to gain control of your assets." Catherine's assessment was both validating and terrifying. She explained that sophisticated manipulators like Brenda often target family members with substantial assets, working methodically over months or years to create situations where they can legally claim guardianship or inheritance rights through accusations of mental incompetency or moral unfitness. "The beauty of her strategy is its multi-layered protection," Catherine continued. "If accused of manipulation, she can point to your son's apparent cooperation and your granddaughter's coached testimony as evidence that she's simply supporting family members who are finally brave enough to speak their truth." Within 24 hours, Catherine had assembled an investigative team that began dismantling Brenda's carefully constructed facade. Private investigator Samuel Torres, a former Boston police detective with specialized training in financial crimes and family fraud, immediately identified red flags in Brenda's background that suggested a pattern of predatory behavior. "Your daughter-in-law has been running this exact same playbook before," Samuel reported during our first meeting. "I found sealed court records from Dallas County, Texas, where she successfully isolated her previous mother-in-law before gaining control of the woman's estate after her death. The Texas case revealed disturbing parallels to my situation. Brenda's first mother-in-law, 73-year-old Helen Morrison, had died intestate after being estranged from her family following accusations of inappropriate behavior with her grandsons. Police had investigated reports of elder abuse, but Helen died of a stroke before charges could be filed, leaving her assets to be inherited by her son and his wife. The medical examiner noted suspicious circumstances," Samuel continued. "Mrs. Morrison had been isolated from her support network, was showing signs of severe psychological stress, and had recently changed her will to exclude family members who'd supposedly abused her." Sound familiar? Simultaneously, computer forensics expert Diane Kim began tracing the digital footprints of Brenda's smear campaign against me. Within a week, she'd uncovered a sophisticated network of fake social media accounts, anonymous email addresses, and fabricated online reviews designed to destroy my reputation across multiple platforms. "She created at least 12 false identities," Diane explained, showing me printouts of Facebook posts, Nextdoor comments, and Google reviews that painted me as a dangerous predator. Each account has a detailed backstory and posting history designed to appear legitimate. She's been planning this campaign for months, possibly years. The fake accounts had spread warnings about me throughout online communities where parents gathered to discuss child safety. Concerned mothers shared first-hand experiences of my inappropriate behavior at school events that had never occurred. Former neighbors described witnessing troubling interactions between me and children that were complete fabrications. Most insidiously, Brenda had created accounts impersonating other grandparents who claimed to have similar experiences with manipulative adult children who protected their families from predatory elderly relatives. This created an echo chamber where my situation appeared to be part of a larger pattern of family abuse rather than the isolated false accusations it actually represented. Catherine's team also uncovered evidence of Brenda's financial desperation that provided clear motive for her elaborate scheme. Forensic accountant Michelle Carter reviewed bank records, credit reports, and mortgage documents that painted a picture of impending financial collapse hidden behind suburban respectability. "She's been gambling online for at least 3 years," Michelle reported. Between casino websites, sports betting, and cryptocurrency speculation, She's lost approximately $85,000 while accumulating massive debt through payday loans and credit card cash advances. The financial pressure had been building for months before Brenda's campaign against me intensified, suggesting that her timeline was driven by desperation rather than patience. She needed access to my assets quickly to avoid bankruptcy, foreclosure, and potentially criminal charges for fraud. But our most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Brenda's own technology. Diane's forensic analysis of social media activity patterns revealed that many of the anonymous calls to my clients and CPS reports had been made from devices connected to Brenda's home Wi-Fi network. She got sloppy when using voice-over internet calling services, Diane explained. The timestamp data shows calls to your real estate clients were made from her home address during hours when she claimed to be working. We can prove she's been the source of the anonymous harassment. Armed with this evidence, Catherine filed multiple legal actions simultaneously: a defamation lawsuit against Brenda seeking substantial monetary damages, a motion to dismiss the restraining order based on fabricated evidence, and a formal complaint with the Massachusetts Bar Association regarding the unethical conduct of Brenda's attorney. "We're not just going to defend you," Catherine announced during our strategy meeting. "We're going to systematically destroy her credibility while exposing every lie she's told. By the time we're finished, everyone who believed her accusations will understand exactly how they were manipulated." For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt something other than despair. The fog of confusion and isolation was beginning to lift as professional investigators validated what my heart had always known: I was the victim of an elaborate con game designed to steal my family and my assets. Now it was time to fight back with the truth as our most powerful weapon. The unraveling of Brenda's elaborate deception began with a phone call that would haunt my dreams forever. Lily's small voice, more desperate and terrified than I'd ever heard it, reached me during what she later described as the darkest moment of her young life. "Grandma Dorothy, I'm hiding in the school bathroom," she whispered, her words barely audible through her tears. "Mommy brought me to that doctor again yesterday, and she made me say terrible things about you into a recording machine. She told me if I didn't sound scared enough, they would take me away and I'd never see Daddy again." My granddaughter's next words shattered any remaining doubt about the systematic psychological abuse being inflicted upon her. "She practices with me every night now," Lily continued. "She makes me pretend to be afraid of you and repeat stories about bad touching that never happened. When I cry and say they're not true, she screams at me and says I'm too stupid to remember what really happened." The recording sessions Lily described revealed the sophisticated nature of Brenda's evidence fabrication. She'd been creating audio and video files of her daughter making false accusations against me, building a library of proof that could be presented to authorities, therapists, and potentially courts as genuine disclosures of abuse. "Yesterday she hit me because I kept saying I love you instead of saying I'm scared of you," Lily sobbed. "She said if I don't do a better job pretending, bad people will take me to a scary place and I'll never come home. Grandma, I'm so scared, but not of you. I'm scared of Mommy." Through Catherine's legal channels, we learned that Brenda had been shopping for therapists who specialized in recovered memory therapy, seeking professionals who might validate her daughter's coached accusations without recognizing signs of parental manipulation. Dr. Patricia Chen, the therapist Brenda finally selected, had initially been fooled by the performance. The child presented with apparent trauma responses, Dr. Chen later testified. But as sessions continued, I noticed significant inconsistencies between her verbal reports and her behavioral indicators. Children who've experienced genuine trauma typically exhibit specific patterns of fear response that were absent in Lily's case. Dr. Chen's detailed notes documented how Lily's traumatic memories changed between sessions, becoming more elaborate and dramatic in ways that suggested external coaching rather than natural memory recovery. Most tellingly, the child showed no fear responses when discussing me directly, but became visibly anxious when asked about her mother's reactions to their therapy sessions. "I began to suspect that this child was being coached to make false accusations," Dr. Chen continued. "Her distress appeared to be caused not by past trauma, but by current pressure to maintain lies about someone she clearly loved and missed." Meanwhile, Samuel Torres's investigation into Michael's behavior patterns revealed the psychological manipulation that had transformed my loving son into an active participant in destroying his own mother. Financial records showed that Michael had been completely unaware of Brenda's gambling debts and was himself a victim of systematic deception. Your son has been receiving what appears to be psychiatric treatment for recovered memories of childhood trauma, Samuel reported. Brenda found a therapist who specializes in helping adults recover suppressed memories of abuse. She's been paying for these sessions while convincing Michael that his positive memories of you were psychological defense mechanisms hiding deeper trauma. The therapist in question, Dr. Marcus Williams, had been disciplined twice by the state medical board for using controversial techniques that implanted false memories in vulnerable patients. His treatment notes, obtained through legal discovery, showed that Michael had arrived with no memories of abuse but gradually recovered detailed scenarios that perfectly matched Brenda's narrative. She's been drugging him, Samuel continued grimly. Prescription anxiety medications that she claims are for his trauma recovery, but which actually make him more susceptible to suggestion and less capable of critical thinking. His personality changes aren't just psychological, they're partially pharmaceutical. The revelation that my son had been medically manipulated added another layer of horror to Brenda's crimes. She'd turned him into both accomplice and victim, using his drugged compliance to validate her accusations while destroying his natural protective instincts toward his own mother. Our most devastating evidence came when Diane Kim successfully recovered deleted files from devices in Brenda's possession. Hidden in an encrypted folder on her laptop were hours of coaching sessions with Lily, practice recordings of false accusations, and detailed plans for timing the revelation of abuse allegations to maximize psychological and legal impact. She's been documenting her own crimes, Diane explained incredulously. There are files titled Dorothy Destruction Timeline and Asset Transfer Strategy that lay out her entire plan. She even recorded herself coaching Lily on how to cry convincingly while making false accusations. The recovered files revealed the calculated nature of Brenda's timing. She'd planned the Christmas Eve confrontation to occur in front of maximum witnesses, scheduled the anonymous calls to my clients during my busiest season, and timed the CPS reports to coincide with school breaks when Lily would be home and available for extended coaching sessions. Most damning were audio files of Brenda explaining her strategy to an unidentified accomplice, possibly her gambling addiction counselor who'd helped develop the psychological manipulation techniques she'd used on both Michael and Lily. The old bitch has over $400,000 in retirement accounts plus the house, Brenda's voice said clearly on the recording. Once Michael has legal guardianship because of her mental incompetency, we can access everything. The kid just has to hold up under questioning long enough for the restraining orders to become permanent. But our final breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Michael himself, who'd begun experiencing psychological breakdown as the stress of maintaining lies ate away at his medicated compliance. Frank witnessed this collapse firsthand when Michael appeared at his apartment at 3 a.m, sobbing and begging for help. "I know Mom never hurt me," Michael confessed to Frank while Catherine's team recorded the conversation. "I remember how much she loved me, how safe I always felt with her. But Brenda keeps showing me these therapy notes that say I'm blocking out trauma, and the medication makes everything so confusing. I can't tell what's real anymore." Michael's confession included details about Brenda's threats to leave him and take Lily away if he didn't support her version of events. She'd convinced him that false accusations against me were necessary to protect their family's financial future and Lily's inheritance rights. She said Mom was planning to change her will to exclude us, that we had to act fast to protect Lily's college fund, Michael continued. "But Frank, I don't think any of that was true. I think Brenda's been lying about everything, and I've been helping her destroy the person who loved me most." The weight of evidence against Brenda was now overwhelming: financial motive, documented lies, fabricated evidence, child abuse, elder abuse, medical manipulation of her husband, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Catherine assembled everything into a comprehensive legal filing that would not only clear my name but potentially send Brenda to prison for years. "We have enough evidence to file criminal charges on multiple felonies," Catherine announced. "But more importantly, we have absolute proof that every accusation against you was fabricated." The restraining orders will be dismissed, your reputation will be restored, and that little girl will be safe from further psychological torture. As I sat in Catherine's office reviewing the evidence that would save my family, I felt overwhelming relief mixed with heartbreak for the pain Brenda had inflicted on all of us. My son and granddaughter had been victims of sophisticated psychological manipulation that would require years of therapy to fully heal. But the truth was finally emerging, and justice was within reach. The family courtroom of Judge Rebecca Harrison felt like a coliseum where truth would finally battle lies in front of an audience that could render lasting justice. As I sat beside Catherine Webb, surrounded by boxes of evidence documenting Brenda's elaborate deception, I watched my daughter-in-law maintain her facade of wounded innocence even as her carefully constructed world crumbled around her. Judge Harrison, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and penetrating brown eyes, had spent 30 years presiding over family cases and possessed the experience necessary to recognize sophisticated manipulation when she saw it. Her review of our evidence files took less than 20 minutes before she began questioning Brenda's attorney with barely concealed incredulity. "Counselor, are you seriously asking this court to believe that your client, who has demonstrable gambling debts exceeding $80,000 and a documented history of making identical accusations against previous family members, just happened to discover evidence of abuse at precisely the moment she needed access to Mrs. Fletcher's assets?" The presentation of Diane Kim's digital evidence proved devastating to Brenda's credibility. When Judge Harrison heard the recording of Brenda coaching Lily to make false accusations while threatening to abandon her if she refused to cooperate, the expression on her face shifted from professional skepticism to personal outrage. "In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely encountered such systematic psychological abuse of a child," Judge Harrison stated coldly. "Ms. Brenda Fletcher, you have weaponized your own daughter against innocent family members for financial gain while simultaneously destroying that child's sense of reality and safety." Lily's testimony, conducted in the judge's chambers with child psychologist Dr. Sarah Martinez present, provided the final nail in Brenda's coffin. Free from her mother's intimidation for the first time in months, my granddaughter spoke truthfully about her love for me and her terror of the woman who'd forced her to lie. "I missed Grandma Dorothy every day," Lily said clearly into the court recorder. "Mommy made me practice saying scary things that weren't real. She told me I had to protect our family by saying Grandma hurt me, but Grandma never hurt anybody. She makes the best cookies and reads me stories and always makes me feel safe." When asked about her mother's behavior, Lily's voice became small and frightened. "Mommy gets really angry when I tell the truth about Grandma. She shakes me and yells that I'm too stupid to remember what really happened. She said if I didn't do a good job lying, they would take me away from Daddy forever." Dr. Martinez's psychological evaluation confirmed what we'd all suspected. Lily showed clear signs of being psychologically manipulated by her mother while maintaining genuine love and attachment to me. Her recommendation for immediate supervised visitation with me and intensive therapy for the entire family carried significant weight with Judge Harrison. Michael's testimony proved equally devastating to his wife's case. Standing in the witness box, visibly shaking as the psychiatric medications cleared from his system, he confessed to his own manipulation while begging for forgiveness he wasn't certain he deserved. "Your Honor, I know I failed my mother and my daughter," he said through tears. "Brenda convinced me that my memories of a loving childhood were psychological defense mechanisms hiding trauma I'd blocked out. She showed me therapy notes from doctors who said I was protecting my abuser by maintaining positive feelings toward my mother." Judge Harrison's questions revealed the sophisticated nature of the psychological manipulation Michael had endured. "Did you seek this therapy on your own initiative, Mr. Fletcher?" "No, ma'am. Brenda arranged everything. She said I needed help processing my past before we could protect Lily from similar experiences. The therapist kept saying that my reluctance to accept the abuse meant I was still under my mother's control." When Catherine presented evidence of the psychiatric medications Brenda had been secretly administering to her husband, Judge Harrison's outrage became visible. "You drugged your own husband to make him more compliant with false accusations against his mother?" "Those were prescribed medications for his anxiety." Brenda's attorney protested. "Prescribed by the same doctor who was implanting false memories and administered without Mr. Fletcher's knowledge of their purpose," Judge Harrison shot back. This represents medical malpractice, spousal abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The judge's ruling came swift and comprehensive. Brenda was found guilty of child endangerment through psychological abuse, defamation, conspiracy to commit fraud, spousal abuse through medical manipulation, and filing false police reports. She received an 18-month prison sentence, substantial financial penalties, and immediate loss of custody rights to Lily. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, I am issuing permanent restraining orders preventing Ms. Fletcher from contacting any member of this family or approaching Mrs. Dorothy Fletcher's residence or workplace. Upon release from prison, she will be permitted only supervised visitation with her daughter, pending completion of extensive psychological treatment and parenting classes. Michael was granted full custody of Lily with my immediate restoration to grandparent visitation rights. The restraining orders against me were dismissed with prejudice, and Judge Harrison ordered that all records of false accusations be sealed to protect my reputation. But the judge's final words carried weight beyond legal remedies. This case represents one of the most sophisticated examples of parental alienation and psychological manipulation I have encountered. Mrs. Dorothy Fletcher, you have been the victim of calculated psychological warfare designed to destroy your family relationships and steal your assets. I hope the court's findings provide some measure of justice for the trauma you've endured. The weeks following our legal victory brought gradual healing that felt like emerging from a nightmare into sunlight. Lily spent her first weekend with me since the previous Christmas, initially shy but quickly reverting to the loving, chattering child I remembered. Grandma, can we make cookies like we used to? She asked on Saturday morning, her small hand slipping into mine as naturally as if no time had passed. I missed your kitchen and the way you let me crack all the eggs myself. Michael's recovery proved more complex, requiring months of therapy to undo the psychological damage Brenda had inflicted. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, his new therapist, explained that victims of sophisticated manipulation often struggled with distinguishing between implanted memories and genuine experiences. Your son is essentially recovering from psychological brainwashing, drive. Walsh told me during a family session. It will take time for him to fully trust his own memories and feelings again. Patience and consistent love will be crucial to his healing process. My community's response to the truth revealed both the best and worst of human nature. Many neighbors who'd shunned me offered genuine apologies and invitations to rebuild our relationships. Others seemed embarrassed by their own gullibility and maintained distance rather than acknowledge their role in my persecution. Ruth, my next-door neighbor, brought homemade soup and tears when she learned the full truth. Dorothy, I am so ashamed of how easily I believed those lies. You were always such a good neighbor and friend. I should have known better. St. Matthew's Church welcomed me back with a formal apology from Reverend Mitchell and a special blessing for families recovering from crisis. Several parishioners privately admitted they'd had doubts about the accusations but hadn't possessed the courage to speak up when I needed support most. My real estate career recovered more slowly but steadily as word spread about the false accusations and legal vindication. Harrison Pemberton personally called each client who'd canceled to explain the situation and offer them the opportunity to work with me again if they chose. Dorothy, I owe you a profound apology, he said during our first meeting after the trial. I should have investigated those accusations more thoroughly before taking action against you. Your integrity and professionalism speak for themselves, and I hope you'll forgive my failure to trust that record. 1 year later, as I prepared for another Christmas Eve party, I reflected on the lessons learned from surviving Brenda's systematic destruction of my life. The guest list was smaller now, consisting only of people who'd proven their loyalty during my darkest hours or who'd genuinely earned forgiveness through their actions rather than words. Michael stood in my kitchen, helping prepare the appetizers we'd made together for decades, his movements cautious but increasingly natural as therapy helped him reclaim his authentic self. Mom, I know I can never fully make up for what I put you through, he said quietly. But I want you to know that fighting through this nightmare taught me what real family bonds look like. What we have is stronger now because we've proven it can survive anything. Lily decorated cookies at my dining room table, chattering about school friends and her excitement about starting piano lessons. The trauma of her mother's manipulation would require ongoing therapy, but her resilience amazed everyone who worked with her. Dr. Martinez says I'm really brave for telling the truth even when I was scared, she announced proudly. She says some grown-ups aren't as brave as kids when it comes to doing what's right. As guests began arriving for our Christmas Eve celebration, I watched through my front window as Frank helped Grace carry covered dishes from her car. Janet Morrison, Lily's teacher, had become a dear friend after her courage in recognizing signs of child manipulation. Catherine Webb would be joining us later, having become more than my attorney in the process of fighting for my family. The evening's most precious moment came when Michael approached me near the Christmas tree, his eyes clear and free from the confusion that had clouded them during Brenda's campaign of destruction. "Mom, may I have a hug?" he asked simply. "A real one, like we used to share before everything got so complicated." As my son's arms wrapped around me with the natural affection I'd missed for almost a year, I felt the final pieces of my shattered world click back into place. The hug lasted longer than usual, both of us savoring the simple joy of genuine connection after months of artificial separation. Lily joined our embrace, standing on her tiptoes to wrap her small arms around both of us. "This is how families are supposed to feel," she said with the wisdom of a child who'd experienced both manipulation and genuine love. Safe and warm and true. Standing in my living room surrounded by the people who'd fought for truth and justice, I understood that surviving Brenda's elaborate deception had revealed something profound about the nature of authentic love. Real family bonds cannot be destroyed by lies, no matter how sophisticated or persistent. Truth has its own power that ultimately exposes manipulation and restores relationships built on genuine care rather than control. The most valuable lesson emerged from recognizing that even in our darkest moments, allies exist who will fight for justice when we cannot fight for ourselves. Grace's investigation, Frank's support, Janet's professional courage, Catherine's legal expertise, and Dr. Martinez's psychological insights had combined to create a network of truth-tellers who refused to let lies triumph over love. As Christmas carols played softly in the background and guests shared stories of hope and resilience, I realized that this celebration felt more meaningful than any of the previous 14 years. We were not just marking the holiday, we were celebrating the victory of truth over deception, love over manipulation, and family bonds over financial greed. The greatest gift was watching Lily help serve dessert to our guests, her laughter genuine and unforced as she moved naturally between the adults who'd worked to protect her. Her recovery from psychological abuse was progressing beautifully, proving that children possess remarkable resilience when surrounded by authentic love and professional support. Michael's journey back to his true self continued steadily with each passing month. The medications and false memories were fading, replaced by growing confidence in his own judgment and renewed appreciation for the mother who'd never stopped fighting for their family. Looking back on the nightmare we'd survived, I felt grateful for lessons learned about the importance of documentation, the value of loyal friends, and the necessity of professional help when facing sophisticated psychological manipulation. Most importantly, I'd learned that love tested by lies emerges stronger and more precious than relationships that have never faced such challenges. As our guests prepared to leave that Christmas Eve, each offered hugs and promises to gather again soon. The community we'd rebuilt was smaller but more intentional, based on shared values rather than mere proximity or social convenience. Have you ever faced false accusations that turned your world upside down? How did you find the strength to fight back when everyone around you believed lies instead of truth? Share your experiences in the comments below because stories like these remind us that we're not alone in facing life's most difficult challenges. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button to show your support for families surviving psychological manipulation. Subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and rebuilding trust, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that truth always emerges victorious in the end. Thank you for joining me on this journey from devastation to healing. Remember that authentic family bonds built on genuine love can survive any storm, and there are always people willing to fight for justice when we cannot fight alone. May you find the courage to speak your truth and the wisdom to recognize real love when it appears in your life. Until next time, hold your genuine loved ones close and never let anyone convince you that lies are stronger than love.